Good morning, everyone, and welcome to ABC Chat. My name's Rich. I'm part of the team here at Kaleidoscope, and lovely to have you with us. You're joining for a momentous occasion. This is episode 9 of ABC Chat. It's also the last in our current series. We'll be back, don't worry at all, but the last in our current series. So if you've been joining us for the past 8 weeks and joining again today, congratulations. Thank you. And well done. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you're choosing week 9 as your first time to join with us, a huge welcome to you. Thanks so much for your time. And I think you're joining for a bit of a cracker and a nice way for us to go out. What is this thing you've wandered into? ABC Chat. ABC standing for Apart but Connected. In these most challenging of times, connection ever more important, even if logistically tricky, and even if slightly easier than before, still a completely different world to where we were not very long ago at all. So ABC Chat is one humble way to keep us connected at a time of us being apart. Every week, we're joined by a special guest. This week, of course, being no exception, and lovely to have Kieron Boyle from Guys and St Thomas's Charity with us this morning. Good morning, Kieron.
Morning, Richard.
Kieron, how are you? How's lockdown been treating you?
Yeah, no, it's been all right. It probably hasn't been as quite strange an experience for us as it has been for some. We're shielding at home. But we have been for some time before this. So actually, kind of my wife and I have described it as kind of shielding, but without FOMO, because of course, nobody's going to things at the moment. So it hasn't been quite so strange at a personal level.
Yes, how much worse this would have been if actually half the population was still able to do everything.
Well, I mean, these are the things that we have to think about.
At least if we're all having to sit at home, there is some.
Yeah, exactly.
There's at least some level of equity there. Kieron, thank you so much for joining, and we're going to be hearing from you as we go through. As regular viewers know, ABC Chat is a show in two halves. We're streaming live through YouTube, but also very much encouraging you to play along on Twitter. We have sort of Twitter rules. They're not really rules, but prompts maybe, which is just there on the screen. So please do use this opportunity to share your reflections. We'll be throwing some questions at you. But also think about ways that you can connect, possibly with others you might not have connected with otherwise, whether that's liking their tweets, retweeting them, even sending them a direct message. Please use that opportunity and think about where there might be new connections for you amongst all those joining today. If you're joining after the event, please do continue to tweet, but also feel free to leave a comment under the YouTube video. So please do that as we go through, and we will be firing intense questions at you, such as the particular varieties of who are you and where are you joining us from. That hashtag ABC Chat, please use that ABC Chat, the hashtag. Who are you? Where are you joining us from? That might be from your organisation, your professional grouping, or just the particular room in your house. As always, ABC Chat brownie points for those who, in their introduction, can include some sort of ridiculous drinking receptacle in a quick selfie. Kieron, do you have any form of ridiculous receptacle close at hand?
Well, I mean, I take offence at you calling this ridiculous. It's actually it's a very handy set, to tell the truth. So. And it's great both for drinking, but also for all sorts of things that you find in the garden as well.
Okay, that's lovely. Is there a story behind that? Is there a story you wish to share behind that?
I mean, it's quite embarrassing. So having heard about the trying to have an interesting drinking receptacle, it's actually exposed that earlier in the lockdown. For reasons known only to myself, I got weirdly angsty about the number of mugs that we had in the house. So we had a war on mugs, and we basically removed pretty much all of our drinking vessels. So I guess the moral of that I've discovered is don't be an idiot at home, because you get outed on social platforms when you do.
Kieran, I don't think there's anything wrong with a war on mugs. I imagine many people at home have been using lockdown for similar purposes. If you have, please let us know. I think, Kieran, just to make clear that, well, just for the sake of fairness here, we allowed you to interpret ridiculous in any way you wanted. So we get set that question. That's how you responded.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
Kieran, thank you. And I'm returning to the archive this morning. People have seen this before, which is my lovely little Blackbird espresso mug. Purely so, I just quite enjoy doing the fake drinking from a distance, which probably I should know better than to mess around with espresso mugs on sort of live broadcasts. But anyway, Kieran, thank you very much. Thank you for those introducing yourselves on Twitter. Please do let us know who you are, where you're joining from. ABC Chat, that hashtag. If you have a ridiculous drinking receptacle, if you too have been on a war on mugs in lockdown, please do let us know. And thanks for all those across our whole series who have been sharing various mugs of various descriptions as we have gone through. It's been lovely to see them. So we'll move on. And our first section, as always, is all about learning. So things are moving pretty fast at the moment. Our world is constantly changing. It always is changing, but circumstances at the moment are giving that an added push. So we think it's really valuable just to carve out a bit of time to think about what you've learned over the last week, what you know now, which you didn't know last week. Kieran, what have you learned over the last week?
I've been thinking quite a lot about permission over the past week. I just had one of those moments, I'm sure loads of people had them, of thinking about lots of the positive things that we've done, like either at work or just like personally in life, as a response to events. And so few of them actually seem like there was any barrier to doing them before lockdown. So I've been thinking about kind of what was it? Why did we organizationally at home need permission to do these things? And I guess the learning is, can we spot as we come out of this and kind of stuff starts going back to whatever stuff it's going to go back to? How do we not need to feel that we need permission on so much stuff?
Kieran, thank you very much indeed. I think one of the things of this format is that we don't get to see everyone at home nodding. But I am certain that there are people saying, yeah, why didn't we do that? Didn't we do that before? The strange case of the teleconference persisting for so long when there were video conference opportunities. What? Why did we do that? Kieran, lovely. Thank you very much. Please, joining at home, share what you've learned over the last week. ABC Chat. I think what I've learned, Kieran, I suppose it's a bit of a follow-up to yours in many ways, which is just about, it's about evaluation. It's sort of, to give it its lovely technical name. But all of this new stuff which we're having, it's so easy just to rush in and go, okay, well, look, we can do new things now, we can do new things. But the space and time to properly reflect on whether that was a worthwhile thing to do. I think in lots of conversations we have, people absolutely recognise the need, but actually finding the time to do that is something which sort of lags behind a bit. So it's one of those curious things where we can sort of go, yeah, that's important, but are we going to do it? Maybe not. And so just even recognising that disconnect is something which certainly I've seen. And Kieran, judging by your response, probably something you're seeing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess also there's that slight risk, I guess, of certainly we might be falling into it, of thinking it's all crazy now, but we're going to get to a moment where it stops being crazy and we're going to have time to kind of sit back, reflect, and learn about what's happened. And that may happen. Or it may well be we get to that time and it also feels, crazy and different in another way. And it's kind of like a forever tomorrow sort of activity to do that reflection and learning.
Yes. Kieran, thank you very much. This is a half-hour show. We've barely even started, and I feel we could just continue on this topic for about 4 hours. So if everyone's okay with clearing their diaries, can we? It might be trespassing slightly. But Kieron, thanks very much, and again, please do share on ABC Chat what you've been learning, how you've sort of been finding time to reflect, both on sort of why did you need permission, why did you struggle to find the space to have that time for evaluation. We'd love to hear your thoughts. ABC Chat. We will move on, and it's that point in the show, which in a different world we might call our keynote speaker, which we absolutely don't. What we're interested in is stories. Hence why we call this little bit Jackanory, to the consternation of people who go, "What on earth is that?" Normally a slightly younger generation, and to the sort of wide smile of those a bit older who go, "Oh yeah, Jackanory, storytelling." For those who don't know what I'm talking about, you can Google it afterwards. But this is all about a story, not specifically about our current times, but with resonance for it. Kieron, what story are you going to be telling us today?
I'm going to tell 3 super short stories, 3 vignettes. It was going to be, I was going to call it wins that aren't wins and losses that are, but then I realised that was more than 280 characters on Twitter, so I went with something else.
Excellent, Kieron. Well, firstly, points for brevity, and away you go.
Yeah, great. So the story is going to be about work that we do at the charity. And for those who don't know us, we're an urban health foundation, and we run long-term programs on urban health issues, one of which is childhood obesity. And on our work on childhood obesity, we're really interested in how do you create healthier food environments, and how do you create more affordable, healthy food options for people. I'm going to tell 3 vignettes about work that we've been doing, and sometimes kind of when wins have turned out well, not to be, and sometimes when things that we thought weren't wins actually perhaps were quite important. So the first story. The first story is about advertising. So a lot of our eating decisions are unconscious, but informed by advertising. So some of the stuff that we've been doing at the charity has been thinking about how you change the advertising environment around teenagers in particular. And we're working with the Mayor of London on this, who was interested in banning advertisements on the TfL estate. So that's like bus stops, tubes, so like a third of advertising space in London. It's an extraordinary amount. And the industry was, food industry, wasn't too positive about this. I mean, the line was a bit confused. The line was simultaneously, well, advertising doesn't have that much effect, but also TfL is going to lose loads of revenue from all the advertising spend that we do, so probably both can't be true. But anyway, worked with the mayor on this, and London showed political leadership. It banned junk food ads from TfL to say it, and that kind of feels a big win, right? At the same time as doing that, we had another project going on, and this was trying to understand about how teenagers interact with their environment around them. And we worked with a Danish organisation called GEL there, and they're an organisation who basically helped Times Square in New York become pedestrianised. So what they do is they just go watch spaces and observe what's happening. So they saw Times Square in New York, that there were like 15 times the number of people walking through it as driving through it, but the whole thing was designed for cars. So worked to shift that around. And we did a project with them, which was looking at 2 streets in South London, which we'd used all sorts of data and machine learning to try and find the 2 streets that were most similar in every regard, other than their levels of childhood obesity. We're trying to understand, what's different about the physical environment there. And so a bunch of very tall Danes went down to South London with a number of community researchers, and basically just kind of looked at the environments. And there are all sorts of interesting things that came out of it. But one thing that actually came out really clearly was the importance of bus stops for teenagers. Teenagers just hanging around at bus stops, particularly after school. And then kind of as you look at those bus stops, particularly kind of the hubs, you realise that it's great. Those bus stops no longer have junk food ads on them, but actually behind the bus stops are ginormous fast food restaurants. And the fast food restaurants are spending loads of money, like extra rent, to have those locations. So yeah, you don't see the golden arches on the on the billboard. You actually see the real thing behind it. So all of a sudden, that's starting to feel less fulfilling. The third story, also going on at the same time, is it's not just junk food. Most of us, independent of our economic background, most of us buy most of our food from supermarkets or convenience stores. So we've been working in the bit of London where we work, which is South London, with every major supermarket across 200 stores to run a trial, pretty much kind of based on nudges, behavioural insights, trying different things in stores. So, taking sugary cereal away from kids' eye height, placing it at a different height, substituting a really unhealthy product for a slightly less unhealthy product, removing price promotions on really unhealthy stuff. Now, firstly, to get this project underway, I've never been involved in something with more lawyers. And it turns out, because trying to get all of these supermarkets to work together, well, it actually gets pretty close to monopoly law. And although it's good, like the same laws apply about trying to kind of stop price fixing. But anyway, got it off the ground. Now we're kind of midway into it, the results are interesting. So what we've been doing, we've been looking at till receipts to see, are people buying healthier food? So is the basket healthier, but also what's the impact on store profitability? And so as you kind of look at the results, they're mixed. So it definitely shows some impact, some positive impact of doing all of this, but it's not ginormous. And so that kind of feels like a bit of a loss. But interestingly, we then looked at the impact on store profitability, and that hasn't changed at all. And actually, that turns out to be this ginormous win, because the big barrier probably to a lot of supermarkets doing more around testing healthier options and healthier products is really nervous about changing the store concept. But actually, it turns out that you've been able to mess with it in all sorts of ways with these stores, and it hasn't, sales have been pretty resilient through it. So, I mean, that leaves with, I guess, an interesting question at the end, because what's the real question about kind of the behavioural insight stuff, or what's the real question about, well, what are the barriers to stores doing more here? And indeed, why does competition law make it so hard for these retailers if they're trying to do something in the public benefit as well? So 3 stories, some of which were wins, but maybe don't feel like it, and some of which were losses, but actually there might be a much bigger win behind them.
Kieron, thank you very much indeed. If this was any sort of normal face-to-face get-together, we would now all rise to our feet and give you a round of applause, which of course we still can do in our virtual world. So Kieron, thank you very much indeed. And what again, a lovely way to finish this current run of ABC chats, not just with one story, but with 3. Not that you're trying to outdo anyone else who's come on ABC chat, but you're raising the bar for the next series. So at this point, we'd very much like your questions at home, please. So what we'd like you to do is to make use of this format. So to ask questions which you may ask from the safety of your laptop, you may not otherwise ask in person, such as, do Danes come in other heights other than tall? That might be a question you want to ask. I think the answer is yes, but we can get Kieron to you on it. But what one question would you like to ask from the safety of your laptop, which you wouldn't ask otherwise? And so, Kieron, I'll take chair's prerogative to begin with, if that's okay. Just as questions come through. And thanks again, I think so much food for thought there, crammed into so few minutes. But what it got me thinking about was groupthink.
Yeah.
And that, actually, I'm thinking about you going into that meeting with TfL on advertising and saying, I'm not sure actually this is the right answer. And that could have been an interesting meeting if that had gone down that way. In the context of COVID, I've been thinking about ventilators. It seemed like for a month, the only thing we talked about as a nation was how to make a ventilator. And then it sort of quite quickly appeared that actually we didn't need Formula One teams to now be making ventilators instead of cars, and we were okay. And we moved on very quickly. But Kieron, what's your perspective on how do we avoid us all charging to one thing obviously being the right answer, rather than looking at other places?
Yeah, so I think that's it. It's kind of one thing obviously being the right answer. So I think so certainly we've got to be cautious about received wisdom. In my view, so I mean, using the TfL things, that is a really good thing. That is a really good thing. That's an important step that London has made. But on its own, it's not enough. And I think that's kind of the big risk of received wisdom for me, is that often the risk is less about kind of the individual idea, but received wisdom often kind of just takes us down just like one angle and saying that if we do this one thing, the result will happen from it. And received wisdom, I think, often doesn't track so much the systems within which things sit. So I mean, what works there? I guess the big thing is always kind of checking those assumptions that you're bringing as you come to something. So the assumption there would have been that advertising alone and ads alone are the thing, and billboards alone are the thing that you need to be going at there, rather than recognizing that kind of storefronts themselves are ginormous adverts for something.
Kieron, thank you very much indeed. Regular viewers of ABC Chat may be transported back to the discussion we had just a few weeks ago with Harry Rutter about complexity in many things. Morning, Harry, if you're joining, who I'm sure will be nodding along very vigorously at the fact that just pointing to one thing is rarely the right answer. Again, really welcome others' reflections of that as we go through. Questions starting to come in. Question from Kate. Thanks for joining, Kate. So Kieron, obviously you've now started working with some of those major players and their lawyers, whether that is the sort of supermarkets or advertising firms, as well as TfL and others. Having had that experience, are you feeling more or less optimistic that we'll get there than when you started?
Really good question. Like much more optimistic. We've always got to kind of be very careful about vested interests. But I mean, actually, I've spent a career working in policy. You know, vested interests don't just sit in private enterprise; they also sit in public organisations as well. I mean, some of the things that have really struck me about working as we do, so for public benefit with some of these big corporations, is that often there are within these organisations people whose values alignment is incredibly close to that which you might normally say kind of tends to exist within public sector organisations or charitable organisations. But often they're quite small teams. So I won't name the international fast food brand because I don't want to be seeing too many more of those lawyers. But the team working on these sorts of issues in the UK is 3 people. And they're desperate to do loads of great stuff, but 3 people in a ginormous enterprise. So actually we found that working with them as a charitable organisation, we've been able to share with them ideas, approaches, values, support, I guess, momentum, motivation for the work they're doing. So look, it's tricky and we need to be careful, but much more optimistic.
Good, Kieron, really pleased to hear it. And I'm sure that'll be resonating with a lot of people about actually when you get down to individual values, there's often space to create that sort of shared shared agenda. The time is racing past today. What's going on? We're going to have time for one last question, if that's okay, and then we will move on. Just to say that, Harry Rutter, thank you for confirming via Twitter that you were nodding vigorously. Please do send our regards to your hedgehog. Question from Andrew. Andrew, thanks so much for joining, saying, I think completely taking what you've said, Kieron, but how do we stop getting lured into a trap of just focusing on the quicker wins, such as banning junk food ads, versus more effective but sort of longer term outcomes? So, for example, not allowing junk food outlets near schools. When we've only got a finite amount of energy, are we not always going to be drawn towards the sort of the quicker end of things?
We need both. We need both. So certainly, kind of in our thinking, it's always kind of about trying a number of different things at once. In part because what seems quick might have something deeper underneath it. So take the kind of the supermarkets work. I mean, that wasn't quick to get off the ground, but let's call that kind of like a quicker win in a way, right? Because it's actually about working within the existing environment and saying, can we just shift stuff around slightly to see if that has marginal impact? But underneath it, that has led to a very, very deep question around, in the way that we set up competition law, are we almost kind of making at times a self-fulfilling prophecy there? That because we're setting it up to stop people taking advantage, and frankly, a lot of private enterprise does, but are we allowing for any other certain kind of option than that to happen? So it's absolutely about a variety of approaches. One of the things that we've also found just in the work that we do that kind of helps with that kind of that short-term, long-term piece is actually just kind of the centrality of community voice in it, because that can often be the biggest push against just kind of short-term wins, because short-term wins often are just kind of not just short-term wins, but they're also only around for the short term and often actually don't even realize kind of their full potential. So actually kind of community voice is often a pretty good antidote against it just being the stuff that you can do quickly.
Kieron, thank you very much indeed. The eagle-eyed of you will have noticed that I presented two options to Kieron, which he just selected both. And so, Kieron, I'm amazed that you used to work in policy. I think that's a sort of a revelation that we could try to square that circle. Kieron, thank you very much.
Apparently, we have some clever systems thinking answer to that.
I'm sure we'll cover that next time. We're fast running out of time. Kieron, thank you so much. Thanks for everyone sending questions through. We'll move on to our final segment of today and of this series, where we have all been finding new ways to give thanks. We are always looking for organisations, people to give a standing ovation to. There's an organisation which we're going to give a standing ovation to, South London Cares, in just one moment. But Kieron, who would you like to give a standing ovation to this week?
Yeah, I'd love to give a standing ovation to a range of organisations, and it's those organisations that are working so hard to ensure that people are getting access to healthy food. So it's food banks, people delivering food boxes, making sure that people are getting access to hot meals. It's so vital.
Kieron, thank you very much. And once again, I can almost hear the nodding of people joining us. Kieron, thank you. We'd very much like you to be sort of sharing on Twitter. Who would you like to give a standing ovation to this week? ABC chat. That hashtag, as always, South London Cares is the organisation we'd like to spotlight this week. We do try and find sort of local organisations to us here in South London. South London Cares, all about bringing together young professionals with older neighbours to help each other, to hang out, to sort of reduce loneliness and isolation and bring people together. Once more, doing fantastic work at all times, but particularly at this time, so important and so impactful. So for all those working on food security, for South London Cares, for all those you at home I wanted to give a standing ovation to, we'll say a due thanks. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of today. So a huge thanks again to Kieron for joining and being so articulate and thought-provoking and wise. Kieron, we really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who's joined, not just this episode, but all episodes of ABC Chat. We'll finish by just saying that there will be an evaluation form, who would have thought it, at the end of this, which for every completed form, we will be donating at least £3 to South London Cares. So even if you hate form filling, we hope that you don't hate giving money to a good cause, so please do fill that in. There will be a recording of this available almost immediately, as well as a blog later on today reflecting on what we've discussed. So thanks again for joining. Thanks again, Kieron. Thanks for everyone who's been involved in this series of ABC Chat, and we will see you again. Thanks very much. Goodbye.